My name is Leonard Parker, I'm 70 years old, and I never thought my own blood would exile me like a stranger. But here I am, staring at a text message that just shattered whatever illusion I had left about family loyalty. You're not welcome at dinner tonight. My wife says you make us uncomfortable. 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 Do you know what's uncomfortable? Spending 43 years building a life, raising a son, burying a wife, and then being told by that same son that your presence, makes his new wife squirm in her designer chair at the dinner table you helped pay for. What they didn't expect, what these ungrateful, scheming parasites never saw coming, was that I held the very key to their roof over their heads. They thought they were dealing with a doddering old fool whose hands shake when he pours coffee. They had no idea they were about to face a man who still remembers every lesson life taught him about survival, about betrayal, and about the sweet, burning taste of justice. Before we dive into this nightmare that became my reality, I need you to understand something. Hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and comment where you're watching from, New York, London, Lagos, Sydney, wherever you are in this world, let me know. Because what I'm about to tell you could happen to anyone. Your parents, your grandparents, maybe even you someday. And when it does, you'll need to remember that being old doesn't mean being powerless. You want to know what uncomfortable really feels like? Let me paint you a picture of my daily reality. I wake up every morning not knowing if my hands will cooperate with me or if they'll betray me like everything else in my life has. Some days, I can button my shirt just fine. Other days, my fingers tremble so badly that getting dressed becomes a humiliating marathon of dropped buttons and frustrated curses. I have Parkinson's disease. Mild, the doctors say, as if there's anything mild about watching your own body slowly, methodically turn against you. As if there's anything mild about the way my son David sighs, when I take too long counting out exact change at the grocery store. As if there's anything mild about the way his wife Jessica whispers to her friends about how I'm becoming such a burden, when she thinks I can't hear her from the next room. Do you know what it's like to go from being the man everyone turned to for strength, for answers, for security, to being the person everyone tiptoes around like you're made of glass? Do you know what it's like to have spent your entire adult life being the provider, the protector, the problem solver, only to have your own family treat you like you're one missed step away from a nursing home? I used to be 6 feet tall and 200 pounds of solid reliability. I built houses with these hands before they started shaking. I coached Little League, fixed neighbors' cars, and never missed a day of work in 35 years at the construction company. When David was 16 and wrapped his first car around a telephone pole, who do you think talked the police out of pressing charges? When he needed money for college, who worked double shifts for 2 years straight to make sure he could get his degree without drowning in debt? But now I'm the embarrassment they hide from their friends. Now I'm the inconvenience they discuss in hushed tones behind closed doors. Now I'm the problem they're trying to solve by making me disappear. The day that text message arrived, I had been looking forward to dinner all week. Jessica had actually called me, to invite me over for Sunday roast. She said David missed spending time with his father. She said they wanted to hear my stories about their grandmother, David's mother, my beloved Margaret, who died 3 years ago and left me drowning in a silence so profound I sometimes forgot how to breathe. I spent the entire day preparing. I showered twice because I was so nervous about my hands shaking while I washed my hair. I picked out my best shirt, the blue one Margaret always said brought out my eyes. I even stopped at the florist and bought Jessica a bouquet of sunflowers because I remembered her mentioning once that they were her favorite. And then, 30 minutes before I was supposed to leave, that message came through. 7 words that felt like a punch to the gut from someone I trusted with my life: "You're not welcome at dinner tonight." I sat in my small apartment, the apartment I moved into after selling my family home to help them buy their dream house, and I stared at those words until they blurred together through my tears. Uncomfortable. I make them uncomfortable. The man who changed David's diapers, who taught him to throw a baseball, who walked him down the aisle at his wedding, makes his wife uncomfortable. You want to know what really makes me uncomfortable? Let me tell you about the slow, insidious way they started erasing me from their lives. It didn't happen overnight. Oh no, they were much more clever than that. It was death by 1,000 tiny cuts, each one small enough to explain away, each one leaving me wondering if I was imagining things, if maybe I really was becoming the paranoid old man they were treating me like. First, the visits got shorter. David used to spend entire Sundays with me after Margaret died. We'd watch football, order pizza, and he'd tell me about work, about his plans, about the future he was building with Jessica. But gradually, those long afternoons became quick coffee dates. Then the coffee dates became brief phone calls. Then the phone calls became text messages that said, "Thinking of you, Dad," with no invitation to actually spend time together. Then came the holidays. Oh, the holidays were when the knife really twisted. Thanksgiving 2023, I showed up with homemade stuffing, Margaret's recipe that David had begged me to make every year since he was 12. I knocked on the door of the house I bought them, holding that casserole dish like an offering, like proof that I still had something valuable to contribute to this family. Jessica answered the door with a smile so forced it looked painful. "Oh, Leonard," she said, and I could hear the disappointment in her voice like I was an unexpected bill in the mail. "We weren't expecting you." "David invited me," I said, confused. "Last week. He said to come at 3. She looked over her shoulder into the house, and I could see the dining room table set for 6 people. 6 people. And I could hear voices, laughter, the sound of family gathering together. But apparently, I wasn't part of that equation anymore. "There must have been some miscommunication," she said, taking the stuffing from my hands like she was accepting a package from a delivery driver. "We're having a small, intimate dinner this year. Just Jessica's parents and her sister's family. Just Jessica's parents. Just Jessica's sister's family. Just everyone except the man whose money bought the turkey they were about to carve, whose money bought the table they were sitting around, whose money bought the roof over their heads while they carved him out of their lives one holiday at a time." I drove home that day with my hands shaking so badly I had to pull over twice. Not from the Parkinsons, from pure, unadulterated rage. I sat in my car in a grocery store parking lot and screamed until my throat was raw. I screamed at Margaret for dying and leaving me alone with these people. I screamed at myself for being so naive, so trusting, so pathetically grateful for any scrap of attention they threw my way. But the real betrayal, the one that still makes my blood boil when I think about it, was yet to come. Because what I discovered next made their holiday exclusion look like a friendly misunderstanding. Let me rewind and tell you about the sacrifices I made for these people, because you need to understand the full scope of their betrayal to appreciate the magnitude of my rage. When David and Jessica got engaged, they came to me with stars in their eyes and a real estate listing pulled up on Jessica's phone. "Look, Dad," David said, sliding the phone across my kitchen table. "It's perfect. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, that big kitchen Jessica's always wanted. It's in the best school district, close to both our jobs, everything we could ask for." I looked at the listing price and felt my heart sink. It was beautiful, no doubt about it. The kind of house Margaret and I had dreamed of owning when we were young. The kind of house we never quite managed to afford while we were busy paying for David's education, his car, his wedding, all the things parents do without thinking twice because that's what love looks like. "It's expensive," I said carefully, not wanting to crush their dreams but needing them to understand reality. "We know," Jessica said, and her voice had that edge it gets when she's about to ask for something she has no right to ask for. "We've been thinking, and we know it's a lot to ask, but we were wondering if maybe you could help us with the down payment." Help with the down payment. Such a simple phrase. Such a reasonable request. Just help, just a little boost to get them started in life. Except when I asked how much they needed, the number that came out of David's mouth wasn't a boost, it was a wholesale liquidation of everything I had spent my entire adult life building. I spent that night staring at the ceiling, thinking about Margaret, about the plans we'd made, about the modest retirement we'd saved for. We were going to travel, she and I. We were going to see Europe, maybe take a cruise, visit her sister in California. We were going to enjoy the golden years we'd earned through decades of hard work and careful saving. But she was gone, and David was my only family, and when your only child looks at you with hope in his eyes and tells you about the future he wants to build with the woman he loves, what kind of father says no? So I said yes. I said yes to liquidating my bonds, my stocks, my retirement accounts. I said yes to selling Margaret's jewelry, the pieces I had bought her for anniversaries and birthdays, the pieces I sometimes held in my hands when the loneliness got too heavy to bear. I said yes to emptying my savings account, the account we had built up nickel by nickel over 40 years of marriage. I even said yes to selling our family home, the house where David took his first steps, where Margaret hung Christmas stockings every December, where we hosted birthday parties and graduation celebrations, and where I thought I would live until the day I died. I sold it all and moved into a cramped 2-bedroom apartment because David and Jessica needed their dream house more than I needed my memories. The day we closed on their house, David hugged me in the real estate office and whispered, "Thank you, Dad. I'll never forget this. We'll never forget this. Never forget." What a joke. What a cruel, bitter joke. Because within 6 months of moving into their dream house, the house I bought them with the liquidation of my entire life's work, they started treating me like a stranger who had overstayed his welcome. The weekly dinners became monthly dinners. The monthly dinners became, "We'll call you when we're free," dinners. And eventually, they became, "You make us uncomfortable," text messages. Do you see the picture forming here? Do you understand the depth of their selfishness, their ingratitude, their breathtaking sense of entitlement? I had given them everything, and in return, they gave me exile. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Because the text message, the holiday exclusions, the gradual erasure from their lives, all of that was just the opening act. The main event, the betrayal that nearly destroyed me, was still waiting in the wings. It was a Tuesday evening in March when I discovered just how far they were willing to go. I had stopped by their house, my house, the house I bought them, to drop off some tax documents. David had asked me to help him organize his financial records because, despite his college education and his fancy job, he still couldn't figure out how to file his own taxes. I let myself in with the spare key they had given me back when they still pretended to want me around. The house was empty, they were both at work, living their busy, important lives in the house I had purchased with my life savings. I went to the kitchen to leave the documents on the counter where David would see them when he got home. That's when I saw the mail scattered across the granite countertop I had paid for. Bills, catalogs, the usual household detritus. But there, mixed in with the electric bill and grocery store circulars, were 2 pieces of mail that made my blood run cold. The first was from a law firm I didn't recognize. The envelope was already torn open, and I could see part of a letterhead sticking out. My hands, those traitorous, shaking hands, fumbled as I pulled out the document inside. Petition for adult guardianship, the header read. And there, in black and white legal terminology that might as well have been a knife to my heart, was my son's name as the petitioner and my name as the subject. The subject. Like I was a research project, a problem to be solved, a thing rather than a person. I read that document with growing horror and rage. They were claiming I was mentally incompetent. They were claiming I could no longer manage my own affairs. They were claiming I needed someone to make decisions about my finances, my medical care, my living situation. They were claiming, in legal language that felt like acid on my soul, that I was no longer capable of being a human being with rights and dignity and autonomy. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was the second piece of mail, a response letter from a mortgage company regarding their application to take out a home equity loan against the house. Against my house. The house I had bought them with every penny I had in the world. They weren't just trying to control my life. They were trying to steal what little I had left. I stood in that kitchen, surrounded by the appliances I had paid for, staring at documents that proved my own son was planning to have me declared incompetent so he could get his hands on the rest of my money. And then, he was planning to mortgage the house I had given them, turning my life's work into debt they could spend on God knows what. The rage that filled me in that moment was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It was pure, white-hot fury that made my whole body shake. Not from Parkinson's, but from the kind of betrayal that burns away everything except the desire for justice. They thought they were dealing with a helpless old man whose mind was slipping, whose body was failing, whose voice could be silenced with legal paperwork and smooth lies to judges who would see my age and my trembling hands and assume I was already halfway to the grave. They had no idea they had just declared war on a man who had survived 70 years in this world by learning how to fight for what mattered. I took pictures of those documents with my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I had to take 6 shots before I got clear images. Then I carefully put everything back exactly where I had found it and walked out of that house for what I knew would be the last time as a welcome guest. But I wasn't walking away in defeat. Oh no. I was walking away to prepare for battle. You want to know what real strength looks like? It's not the ability to lift heavy things or run fast or intimidate people with your physical presence. Real strength is what you do when everyone has written you off, when everyone has decided you're finished, when everyone has forgotten that wisdom and experience and sheer stubborn determination don't disappear just because your body starts to betray you. I may have Parkinson's disease, but my mind is sharp as a razor. I may walk with a cane sometimes, but I can still outthink people half my age. I may live in a small apartment instead of the family home I sold for my ungrateful son, but I still have allies, still have resources, still have enough fight left in me to make them regret the day they decided to treat me like prey. The first thing I did was call my old friend Robert Chen, a lawyer I had met years ago when we served together on the school board. Robert was retired now, but he still knew his way around family law, and more importantly, he knew me well enough to understand that I wasn't some confused old man making paranoid accusations. "Leonard," he said when I showed him the photos on my phone, "this is serious. They're moving fast, and if they get a judge to sign off on this guardianship petition, you'll lose control of everything, your money, your medical decisions, even where you live." "Can they do that?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer would terrify me. "If they can convince a court that you're incompetent, yes. They can take everything. And once guardianship is established, it's incredibly difficult to reverse." Robert leaned back in his chair and studied the documents more carefully. "But Leonard, there's something you should know. What they're doing here, trying to gain control of your finances while simultaneously taking out loans against property you gifted them, this could be construed as financial elder abuse. That's not just a civil matter. That's criminal. Financial elder abuse." The words hit me like a physical blow. My own son, the boy I had raised, was potentially committing a crime against me. But instead of despair, I felt something else rising in my chest, cold, calculated determination. "What do we do?" I asked. Robert smiled for the first time since I had walked into his office. "We fight back. But we have to be smart about it. We need documentation, witnesses, evidence that you're competent and that they're acting out of greed rather than genuine concern for your welfare." That's when I started building my case. Every conversation with David and Jessica, I recorded on my phone. Every interaction, I documented with dates, times, and detailed notes. Every slight, every exclusion, every instance of their growing impatience with my condition, I catalogued like evidence in a murder trial. I also reconnected with Dr. Sarah Martinez, my neurologist, and asked her to conduct a comprehensive evaluation of my mental competency. The results were exactly what I expected. While I had mild Parkinson's disease that affected my motor skills, my cognitive function was completely normal for a man my age. In fact, Dr. Martinez noted that my memory, reasoning ability, and judgment were all above average. "Leonard," she said as she handed me a copy of her evaluation, "you're dealing with a neurological condition that affects movement, not thinking. Anyone who tries to claim you're mentally incompetent is either ignorant about Parkinson's disease or deliberately lying." Deliberately lying. There it was, in medical terminology, the confirmation of what I already knew in my heart. My son wasn't concerned about my welfare. He was concerned about my wallet. But the ally who surprised me the most was Mrs. Patterson, my elderly neighbor from the apartment complex. I had always thought of her as a sweet, harmless old lady who liked to feed stray cats and discuss the weather. But when I confided in her about what David and Jessica were trying to do, she revealed a side of herself I had never suspected. "Oh, honey," she said, her eyes flashing with an anger that reminded me she had been a civil rights activist in the 1960s, "I've seen this before. My own nephew tried to pull the same stunt on me 10 years ago. These vultures think that just because we're old, we're stupid. They think we'll just roll over and let them steal everything we've worked for." Mrs. Patterson had been a paralegal before she retired, and she knew exactly how these guardianship cases worked. More importantly, she had witnessed David and Jessica's treatment of me firsthand. She had seen them drop me off at my apartment after brief, uncomfortable visits where they checked their phones more than they looked at me. She had heard Jessica complaining on her cell phone in the parking lot about how difficult I was becoming. "I'll testify for you," she said without hesitation. "These young people need to learn that stealing from seniors isn't a get-rich-quick scheme, it's a one-way ticket to consequences they never saw coming." With my team assembled and my evidence gathered, I was ready for whatever David and Jessica thought they could throw at me. But I had one more surprise in store, one more card to play that they would never see coming. Because while they were busy planning my legal destruction, I was planning something that would destroy them right back. The confrontation came sooner than I expected. It was a Thursday evening, about 2 weeks after I had discovered their paperwork, when David called and asked if he could come over to discuss some important family matters. I almost laughed. Family matters. After months of treating me like an unwanted stranger, now he wanted to discuss family matters. "Actually," I said, "I think it would be better if we met at your house. I have some things to discuss with both you and Jessica." He hesitated. "Dad, maybe it would be more comfortable if we talked privately first." "No," I said, my voice harder than he had heard it in years. "If this is about family, then Jessica should be there too. After all, she's the one who finds me so uncomfortable." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "How did you?" "I'll be there at 7, I said, and hung up before he could finish his question. I spent the afternoon preparing for what I knew would be the most important conversation of our relationship. I put on my best suit, the navy blue one I had worn to his wedding. I combed my hair carefully and checked my appearance in the mirror 3 times. If this was going to be a battle, I was going to look like a warrior. I arrived at their house, my house. At exactly 7 o'clock, carrying a manila folder thick with documents. I didn't knock. I used my key, the key they had given me back when they still wanted my money, and walked into the front hallway like I owned the place. Which, legally speaking, I did. "Dad?" David's voice came from the living room, confused and slightly alarmed. "We didn't hear you knock." "I didn't knock," I said, walking into the room where both of them sat on the couch I had helped them pick out, looking guilty as children caught with their hands in the cookie jar. This is my house. I don't need to knock. Jessica's face went pale. David stood up, his hands fluttering nervously, and for a moment, he looked more shaky than I ever had, even on my worst Parkinson's days. Dad, maybe you should sit down. We need to talk about this? I dropped the manila folder on their coffee table with a sound like a gunshot. Legal documents spilled out across the surface, copies of their guardianship petition, their mortgage application, bank statements, emails I had subpoenaed through Robert's connections. The silence in that room was deafening. Jessica actually gasped, a small, strangled sound that told me everything I needed to know about how confident they had been that their scheme would go undetected. Where did you get those? David asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Does it matter? I said, settling into the armchair across from them, the chair I had sat in dozens of times when they still pretended to enjoy my company. The question is, what were you planning to do with them? Dad, it's not what it looks like. It's exactly what it looks like. The words exploded out of me with such force that both of them flinched backward. You want to have me declared incompetent so you can control my money. Then you want to mortgage this house, the house I bought you with my life savings, to fund whatever expensive lifestyle you think you deserve. Jessica found her voice first, which didn't surprise me. She had always been the more calculating of the two. Leonard, we're concerned about your health. The Parkinson's is getting worse, and we think you might need help managing your affairs. My affairs are perfectly managed, thank you very much, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. In fact, let me show you just how well I manage them. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. This is a copy of the deed to this house. The deed that has my name on it as the sole owner because I purchased it outright with cash from the sale of my family home and the liquidation of my retirement accounts. I unfolded the paper slowly, savoring the look of growing panic on their faces. Now, you might be wondering why I'm bringing this up. After all, I gave you this house as a gift. I wanted you to have a good start in life, a foundation to build your future on. I stood up and walked to the mantelpiece, where they had displayed photos of their wedding, their vacations, their happy life funded by my sacrifice. Not a single photo included me. But here's something interesting about gift deeds in this state, I continued, my back still turned to them. If the recipients commit fraud against the donor, if they attempt to financially exploit the person who gave them the gift, that deed can be legally voided. I turned around to face them, and the fear in their eyes was beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Robert Chen sends his regards, by the way. You remember Robert, the lawyer who helped us with the paperwork when I bought you this house? He's been very helpful in reviewing your guardianship petition. He's also been very helpful in filing a counterpetition with the court. What kind of counterpetition? David asked, his voice cracking like a teenager's. The kind that exposes attempted financial elder abuse, I said. The kind that includes recorded conversations, witness testimony, and medical evaluations proving that I'm completely competent to manage my own affairs. The kind that asks the court to investigate whether you've been attempting to defraud an elderly family member. Jessica shot to her feet, her composure finally cracking. You recorded our conversations? That's illegal. Actually, it's not, I said calmly. This is a one-party consent state. As long as one person in the conversation consents to the recording, and since I was always that one person, it's perfectly legal. And let me tell you, those recordings make for fascinating listening. I walked back to the coffee table and shuffled through the papers until I found what I was looking for. For instance, here's a transcript from last month when you two were discussing how to handle the Leonard situation. Jessica, I particularly enjoyed your comment about how I wouldn't last much longer anyway, and that you needed to secure the assets before he gets worse. The blood drained from her face so completely I thought she might faint. David sank back onto the couch like his legs had given out. And David, I continued, your contribution to that conversation was equally illuminating. I believe your exact words were, the old man is getting paranoid and difficult. If we don't act soon, he might change his will or do something crazy with his money. Dad, you don't understand the context. I understand the context perfectly, I said. The context is that you see me as an obstacle to your financial security rather than as your father. The context is that you've been planning to steal from me, control me, and eventually warehouse me somewhere convenient while you spend the money I earned through 40 years of hard work. I sat back down in the chair and looked at both of them for a long moment. They looked small, diminished, like children caught in a lie too big to explain away. But here's what you didn't understand, I said quietly. You didn't understand that being old doesn't mean being powerless. You didn't understand that having Parkinson's doesn't mean having dementia. And you certainly didn't understand that the man who built a life from nothing, who raised a son as a single father after his wife died, who worked 2 jobs to pay for college tuition, might just have enough fight left in him to destroy anyone who tries to take what's his. The room fell silent except for the sound of Jessica's quiet crying. David stared at his hands, unable to meet my eyes. So here's what's going to happen, I said. Tomorrow morning, you're going to withdraw that guardianship petition. You're going to cancel the mortgage application. And you're going to stay away from me and my affairs unless I specifically invite your involvement. And if we don't? Jessica asked, her voice thick with tears and defiance. I smiled then, the kind of smile that had probably scared people when I was younger and stronger, the kind of smile that apparently still worked just fine. If you don't, then I'll make sure the court knows that the house you're living in was purchased through an act of financial elder abuse. I'll make sure they know that you've been planning to defraud me from the moment you accepted my gift. And I'll make sure that when this is all over, you lose everything, the house, your reputations, possibly your freedom. I stood up and straightened my jacket. Oh, and one more thing. That deed I showed you. I've already had it modified. If anything happens to me, if I have a convenient accident, if my health mysteriously deteriorates, if I suddenly decide to sign over power of attorney, this house immediately reverts to my estate. So you'd better hope I live a long, healthy, very independent life. I walked toward the front door, then paused and looked back at them one last time. You know what the saddest part of all this is? I would have given you anything. If you had come to me honestly, if you had treated me with respect, if you had simply asked for help instead of trying to steal from me, I would have helped you with whatever you needed. But you chose greed over love, and now you get to live with the consequences. I left them sitting in that living room, surrounded by the evidence of their betrayal, and drove home to my small apartment with something I hadn't felt in months, satisfaction. But the real battle was just beginning. The courtroom was smaller than I had expected, more like a conference room than the dramatic setting I had imagined from watching legal dramas on television. But there was nothing small about the stakes or the tension that filled the air as we waited for Judge Patricia Hoffman to review the case. David and Jessica sat at the plaintiff's table with their lawyer, a sharp-dressed woman in her 40s who kept glancing at her watch like she had somewhere more important to be. They had hired her after Robert Chen made it clear that this case was going to be more complicated than they had anticipated. I sat at the defendant's table with Robert, feeling strangely calm for a man whose entire future was about to be decided by a stranger in a black robe. I had done everything I could to prepare for this moment. The rest was out of my hands. All rise, the bailiff announced, and Judge Hoffman entered the courtroom with the kind of brisk efficiency that suggested she had seen every possible variation of family drama and wasn't impressed by any of it. She was younger than I had expected, maybe 55, with graying hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that seemed to cut straight through whatever nonsense people tried to present to her. "Please be seated," she said, settling behind the bench and opening the thick file that contained the future of my independence. We're here today regarding a petition for adult guardianship filed by David Parker on behalf of his father, Leonard Parker, and a counter-petition alleging financial elder abuse filed by Mr. Leonard Parker against his son. She looked up from the file and fixed David with a stare that made him shift uncomfortably in his seat. Mr. David Parker, your petition claims that your father is no longer capable of managing his personal or financial affairs due to cognitive decline related to Parkinson's disease. You're asking this court to grant you full guardianship over his person and estate. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor, David's lawyer responded. My client is deeply concerned about his father's deteriorating condition and believes that professional management of his affairs is in Mr. Leonard Parker's best interest. I see, Judge Hoffman said dryly. And Mr. Leonard Parker, your counter-petition alleges that your son is attempting to gain control of your assets through fraudulent means and that you are mentally competent to manage your own affairs. Is that correct? Robert stood up. That's correct, Your Honor. My client is the victim of an attempted financial scam perpetrated by family members who are trying to exploit his medical condition for their own gain. Judge Hoffman nodded and made some notes in the file. This is obviously a serious situation with significant implications for all parties involved. Let's start with the medical evidence. For the next hour, we listened as David's lawyer presented their case. They had found a doctor, some psychiatrist I had never met, who was willing to testify that people with Parkinson's often experienced cognitive decline and that my age made me particularly vulnerable to poor decision-making. They presented evidence of my declining condition, the fact that I had sold my house and moved into a smaller apartment, my occasional difficulty with fine motor tasks, the way I sometimes needed help with complicated paperwork. They painted a picture of a confused, vulnerable old man who needed protection from his own poor judgment. It was skillfully done, I had to admit. If I hadn't known the truth, if I hadn't understood their real motivations, I might have been convinced myself. Then it was our turn. Robert called Dr. Martinez to the stand first, and she systematically destroyed every piece of medical evidence David's team had presented. She explained that Parkinson's disease primarily affects motor function, not cognitive ability. She presented the results of my recent mental competency evaluation, showing that my memory, reasoning skills, and judgment were all well within normal ranges for my age group. In my professional opinion, Dr. Martinez said, looking directly at Judge Hoffman, Mr. Leonard Parker is fully capable of managing his own affairs. While he does have a neurological condition that affects his movement, there is no medical evidence whatsoever that his decision-making ability has been compromised. But the real fireworks started when Robert called me to the stand. I had been dreading this moment, worried that my hands would shake, that my voice would crack, that I would somehow prove their point about my declining abilities. But as I walked to the witness stand and placed my hand on the Bible to be sworn in, I felt steadier than I had in months. Mr. Parker, Robert began, can you tell the court about your relationship with your son and daughter-in-law over the past few years? For the next 45 minutes, I told my story. I told them about the sacrifices I had made, liquidating my entire life savings to buy David and Jessica their house. I told them about the gradual exclusion from family gatherings, the text message telling me I wasn't welcome, the discovery of their legal documents and mortgage application. But most importantly, I told them about the recorded conversations. Robert played excerpts from several recordings I had made, and the courtroom fell silent as David and Jessica's voices filled the air, discussing me like I was a problem to be solved rather than a person to be loved. The old man is getting paranoid and difficult. If we don't act soon, he might change his will or do something crazy with his money. He won't last much longer anyway. We just need to secure the assets before he gets worse. I can't stand having him around. He's so diminished. It's depressing. Judge Hoffman's expression grew darker with each recording. When the audio ended, she looked at David with undisguised disgust. Mr. David Parker, she said, are those your voices on those recordings? David's lawyer whispered something to him, but he nodded reluctantly. Yes, Your Honor. And are those accurate representations of conversations you had about your father? Another whispered consultation with his lawyer. Your Honor, those conversations were taken out of context. I didn't ask about context, Judge Hoffman snapped. I asked if those were accurate representations of conversations you had about your father. Yes or no? Yes, David whispered. Judge Hoffman made more notes, then looked back at me. Mr. Leonard Parker, can you explain to the court why you decided to record these conversations? Your Honor, I said, I started recording them after I discovered the guardianship petition and the mortgage application. I realized that my son and daughter-in-law were planning to take control of my life and my assets, and I needed evidence to protect myself. And how did you discover these documents? I told her about finding the papers on their kitchen counter, about realizing they were trying to have me declared incompetent while simultaneously mortgaging the house I had bought them. So let me understand this correctly, Judge Hoffman said. Your son accepted a substantial financial gift from you to purchase a home, then immediately began planning to gain control of your remaining assets while taking out loans against the property you had gifted him? That's correct, Your Honor. She turned to David's lawyer. Counselor, how do you explain your client's behavior? The lawyer stood up, clearly uncomfortable. Your Honor, my client was genuinely concerned about his father's welfare and was trying to ensure that his assets would be properly managed. By mortgaging property that was gifted to him? Judge Hoffman interrupted. By secretly filing guardianship petitions without first attempting to discuss his concerns with his father? By excluding his father from family gatherings while planning to take control of his finances? The lawyer had no good answer for that. But Robert wasn't finished. He called Mrs. Patterson to the stand, and she testified about witnessing David and Jessica's treatment of me, about hearing Jessica complain about my burden on their lives, about the way they would drop me off after visits like they couldn't wait to get away from me. Then he called my banker, who testified that I had been managing my own accounts competently for decades, that I had never shown any signs of confusion or poor judgment in my financial dealings. Finally, he called a private investigator who had looked into David and Jessica's financial situation. The investigator revealed that they were deeply in debt, spending far beyond their means, and had been counting on the home equity loan to solve their money problems. Your Honor, Robert said in his closing argument, this is not a case about a concerned son trying to protect his aging father. This is a case about financial exploitation, about greed masquerading as concern, about two people who saw an elderly man with Parkinson's disease as an easy mark for their get-rich-quick scheme. He gestured toward me. Leonard Parker is not a confused, helpless victim. He's a sharp, competent man who had the wisdom and courage to protect himself from people who wanted to steal from him. The only question before this court is whether we're going to reward that courage or punish it. David's lawyer made her closing argument, still trying to paint me as a confused old man who needed protection. But her heart wasn't in it anymore. The evidence was too overwhelming, the recordings too damaging, the pattern of behavior too clear. Judge Hoffman deliberated for exactly 15 minutes. When she returned to the courtroom, her expression was grim. I've seen a lot of difficult family situations in my years on the bench, she began, but this case is particularly troubling because it involves such a fundamental betrayal of trust. She looked directly at David. Mr. David Parker, your father gave you the most precious gift any parent can give, his entire life savings, liquidated and transferred to help you build your future. And your response to that gift was to immediately begin planning how to steal whatever he had left. David started to speak, but she held up her hand. I've listened to those recordings, Mr. Parker. I've heard you and your wife discussing your father like he was an inconvenience, a burden, an obstacle to your financial goals. I've seen the evidence of your debt, your desperate need for money, your willingness to exploit an elderly family member to solve your problems. She turned to me. Mr. Leonard Parker, based on the medical evidence presented to this court, you are clearly competent to manage your own affairs. You have demonstrated remarkable clarity of thought and excellent judgment in protecting yourself from what can only be described as an attempted financial crime. She looked back at David. The petition for guardianship is denied. Furthermore, I am referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for possible criminal prosecution for attempted financial elder abuse. But Judge Hoffman wasn't finished. Additionally, I am issuing a restraining order prohibiting David Parker and Jessica Parker from contacting Leonard Parker or attempting to interfere with his financial affairs. Any violation of this order will result in immediate arrest and prosecution. The gavel came down with a sound like thunder. I had won. Not just the case, but my freedom, my dignity, my right to live my life on my own terms. But as I would soon discover, winning in court was only the beginning of their downfall. The consequences of their failed scheme unraveled faster than I could have imagined. Within a week of the court decision, David's employer, a prestigious accounting firm that prized its reputation above all else, somehow learned about the elder abuse investigation. Corporate compliance officers don't like employees who are under criminal investigation for financial crimes, especially when those employees have access to client accounts and sensitive financial information. David was encouraged to resign before they fired him outright. In the professional world, that's the kind of polite fiction that means your career is over. No reputable firm would hire someone with his baggage, and word travels fast in the financial services industry. Jessica lasted exactly 3 days longer than her husband. Her marketing agency decided that having an employee associated with elder abuse allegations was bad for their brand image. They didn't even bother with the polite resignation fiction, they just fired her and escorted her out of the building. But their employment troubles were nothing compared to what happened next. You see, that home equity loan application they had submitted was based on fraudulent information. They had claimed to have my permission to mortgage the property, had forged documents suggesting they had power of attorney over my affairs, had lied about their income and debt levels to qualify for the loan amount they wanted. When the mortgage company learned about the court case and the criminal investigation, they didn't just deny the loan, they reported the fraudulent application to federal authorities. Mortgage fraud is a federal crime, and federal prosecutors take it very seriously. Within 2 months, David and Jessica were facing not just state charges for elder abuse, but federal charges for mortgage fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. Their legal bills started mounting faster than they could possibly pay them, especially with both of them unemployed and their reputations destroyed. That's when Jessica made her first tactical mistake. She called me. I was sitting in my apartment on a Tuesday evening, reading a book and enjoying the peace of knowing that my life was finally my own again, when my phone rang. I almost didn't answer when I saw Jessica's name on the caller ID, but curiosity got the better of me. Leonard? Her voice was shaky, desperate. We need to talk. Actually, we don't, I said calmly. In fact, I believe there's a restraining order that says we specifically don't need to talk. Please, she said, and I could hear her crying. This has all gotten out of hand. We never meant for it to go this far. We're losing everything, our jobs, our house, our future. David is talking about taking a plea deal that could send him to prison. And? I said. And we're sorry. We're so sorry. We made a terrible mistake, and we know that now. But we can fix this. You could tell the prosecutors that you don't want to press charges. You could say it was all a misunderstanding. I sat in silence for a long moment, listening to her cry, feeling absolutely nothing resembling sympathy. Jessica, I said finally, do you remember what you said to your friend Sarah about me being a burden on your lives? Do you remember telling David that I wouldn't last much longer anyway, and that you needed to secure my assets before I got worse? That wasn't, we didn't mean. Do you remember the text message telling me I wasn't welcome at dinner because I made you uncomfortable? Silence. Do you remember excluding me from Thanksgiving dinner in the house I bought you? More silence. Jessica, I want you to understand something very clearly. You're not losing everything because this situation got out of hand. You're losing everything because you chose greed over family, because you chose to see me as a problem to be solved rather than a person to be loved. You're losing everything because you earned it. But Leonard. But nothing, I said, my voice hardening. You made your choices, and now you get to live with the consequences. Don't call me again. I hung up and blocked both their numbers. 3 days later, I got a call from the district attorney's office. David had indeed taken a plea deal, 3 years in prison for elder abuse and fraud, plus full restitution of all legal costs and damages. Jessica got 2 years in community service. But the real justice came when the bank foreclosed on their house. You see, when you're unemployed and facing criminal charges, it becomes very difficult to make mortgage payments. David and Jessica had been living paycheck to paycheck even when they were employed, using credit cards and loans to maintain their lifestyle. Without income, their financial house of cards collapsed in a matter of weeks. The foreclosure notice was posted on their front door, the front door of the house I had bought them, on a cold morning in November. They had exactly 30 days to vacate the premises. I learned about the foreclosure from Mrs. Patterson, who had a friend who worked at the bank's legal department. She brought me the news with a smile that was pure vindication. They're asking $320,000 for it, she told me over coffee in my apartment. That's about $50,000 less than what you originally paid, what with the market changes and all. I thought about that for a moment. $320,000. I could afford that, even after all the legal expenses and the years of living on a reduced income. I had been careful with my remaining money, investing wisely, living modestly. Mrs. Patterson, I said slowly, would you like to live in a nice house with a big garden where you could take care of as many stray cats as you wanted? Her eyes lit up like Christmas morning. 2 weeks later, I bought back the house I had originally purchased for David and Jessica. I paid cash, just like I had the first time, and this time I put it in a trust that would ensure it could never be stolen from me again. Mrs. Patterson moved into the master bedroom, and I took the smaller bedroom down the hall. We turned the third bedroom into a library and the backyard into a cat sanctuary. It was, without question, the happiest living arrangement I had experienced since Margaret died. But the sweetest moment came on the day David and Jessica had to move out. I was sitting in my car across the street, watching as they loaded their belongings into a rented truck. They looked older, diminished, defeated. Jessica kept wiping her eyes with tissues. David moved like a man carrying a weight too heavy for his shoulders. They had fallen so far, so fast. From the golden couple with the dream house and the bright future to unemployed criminals facing prison time and financial ruin. From people who thought they could outwit and exploit an old man to people who had learned that wisdom and experience and sheer stubborn determination don't disappear just because your hands shake sometimes. As they drove away for the last time, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel, sadness. Not for their situation, they had earned every bit of their suffering, but for the family we might have been if they had chosen love over greed, respect over exploitation, honesty over betrayal. David was my son. I had raised him, taught him, loved him unconditionally for 43 years. And he had thrown all of that away for money, for the chance to steal from the man who had given him everything. But then I thought about the new life I was building, about Mrs. Patterson's laughter echoing through the house in the evenings, about the stray cats that had already claimed our backyard as their kingdom, about the elder rights organization where I had started volunteering, helping other seniors protect themselves from the kind of exploitation I had survived. And I realized that sometimes the family you choose is better than the family you're born with. I've been living in our house, truly our house now, for 8 months as I'm telling you this story. Mrs. Patterson and I have established a routine that works beautifully. She handles the cats and the garden, I handle the finances and the household maintenance, and we both handle the cooking and the conversations that make a house feel like a home. David will be released from prison in 2.5 years, assuming good behavior. Jessica got out last month and is living with her sister in another state, working at a retail job that barely covers her probation fees and restitution payments. She'll be paying me back for the legal costs for the next 15 years. I don't know if David will ever try to contact me after his release. Part of me hopes he will, hopes that prison has given him time to understand the magnitude of what he threw away. Part of me hopes he won't, because I'm not sure I could bear to see what he's become. But either way, I'm ready for whatever comes next. You see, this whole experience taught me something important about aging, about dignity, about the difference between being old and being powerless. Society wants to treat seniors like we're fragile, confused, irrelevant. Our own families sometimes see us as burdens, as problems to be managed, as obstacles to their financial security. But here's what they don't understand: we've survived 7, 8, 9 decades in this world. We've weathered storms they can't imagine, overcome challenges they've never faced, accumulated wisdom they haven't even begun to develop. We've buried spouses, raised children, built careers, fought wars, survived depressions, adapted to technological revolutions that turned the world upside down. And they think a little thing like Parkinson's disease, or arthritis, or gray hair, or the need for reading glasses makes us helpless. They have no idea what they're dealing with. I may walk a little slower than I used to. My hands may shake when I'm tired or stressed. I may need to ask the pharmacist to open my pill bottles because my grip isn't what it once was. But my mind is sharp as a blade, my determination is stronger than ever, and my capacity for righteous anger when someone tries to take advantage of me is absolutely limitless. David and Jessica learned that the hard way. I spend my days now helping other seniors who are facing similar situations. The elder rights organization I volunteer with gets calls every week from people whose families are trying to gain control of their assets, who are being pressured to sign over power of attorney, who are being slowly isolated and manipulated by relatives who see dollar signs instead of people. I tell them what I learned: document everything, trust your instincts, and never underestimate your own power to fight back. Age doesn't erase your rights. Illness doesn't eliminate your dignity. And family relationships don't give anyone the right to steal from you. Some of them are afraid to fight back. They're worried about being alone, about burning bridges, about what will happen if they stand up to the people who are supposed to love them. I tell them about Mrs. Patterson and our cats and our house full of laughter and mutual respect. I tell them that sometimes the bridge you burn is the one that was leading you toward a cliff anyway. I tell them that being alone is better than being surrounded by people who see you as prey. And I tell them that justice, when it finally comes, tastes sweeter than any family dinner you were never really welcome at anyway. Every morning when I wake up in the house I bought twice, surrounded by the life I chose to build rather than the one I was told to accept, I feel grateful for the text message that started this whole nightmare. You're not welcome at dinner tonight. My wife says you make us uncomfortable. That message was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it forced me to stop pretending that people who didn't value me deserved my love, my money, or my presence in their lives. Now I'm surrounded by people who choose to be with me because they enjoy my company, not because they want something from me. I'm living in a house where I'm welcomed and appreciated, not tolerated and whispered about. I'm spending my remaining years fighting for justice and dignity, not begging for scraps of affection from people who never deserved my generosity in the first place. If this story hit you hard, if it reminded you of your own family situation or made you think about the seniors in your life who might be facing similar challenges, then I want you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button, drop a like on this video, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from: New York, London, Lagos, Sydney, wherever you are in this world. Because no one deserves to be silenced or stolen from just because they're aging. No one deserves to be treated like a burden by the people who are supposed to love them. And no one should have to face this kind of betrayal alone. My name is Leonard Parker, I'm 70 years old, and I want you to remember something: being old doesn't mean being powerless. Having a medical condition doesn't mean having no rights. And sometimes the best revenge against people who underestimate you is simply refusing to disappear when they try to erase you. They thought they were dealing with a helpless old man whose time was up. They had no idea they were about to face a warrior whose fight was just beginning. And now, 8 months later, as I sit in my beautiful house with my chosen family and my dignity intact, I can honestly say that the best years of my life started the day they told me I wasn't welcome at their table. Because that's the day I learned I was strong enough to build my own.